Greetings from the Poets and Quants headquarters in Oakland, California. My name is Nathan Allen. I am a staff writer and editor at Poets and Quants. And I am here today because we have an ongoing series of interviewing a few of the top professors from our top undergraduate professors list, which was published on Poets and Quants for Undergrads last month in November. Today I have a professor from the University of North Carolina's Kenan-Flagler Business School. Her name is Shimul Melwani. Shimul, how are you today?
I'm good. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to ask you just a little bit about your background. There's a lot of info out there on you in terms of your teaching career and your education leading up to that. But I'm wondering if you can give our viewers, readers, a little bit of background on who you are, where you grew up, and what led you to pursuing being a business school professor.
Sure. It feels like such a long story and such a long path that it's a little difficult I'll try and keep it brief. So I was born and raised in Mumbai, India, actually, and I've lived in the US now for about 15 years. Most of that time was really spent in graduate school, but I was born in Mumbai. I sort of went to an all-girls school pretty much till I was in 12th grade. And then when I went to college, I stayed in India for that, and I got my undergrad degree in biomedical engineering, so quite different from what I'm doing now, really quite different from what I'm doing now. I think I wrote in the Poets and Quants interview, the text interview, that I could not have imagined doing this particularly for my job. My dad was an entrepreneur. He had a small business, and my mom was a social worker, and I went to engineering college only because I'm Indian, and people were like, "You're good at math, so that's something you should do." And I didn't really feel, and this is one of the things I tell students when I talk to them, that I had really no idea of what I wanted to do with my life, and it felt fine to have people sort of tell me what to do at the time, and just to do what seemed like in some ways like a job that would give me a good deal of security and stability, and was sort of had some degree of prestige. And I really made my decision primarily on the basis of those things. And about halfway through my college degree, or time in college in India, which is quite different than here. It's not as creative, and you don't really actually get a chance to form relationships with your professors in the same way. And classes are very much, you show up if you want to, and you just do really well at the exam at the end of the year sometimes. But halfway through, I started feeling like I had not really made the right choice for my life. And I was doing an internship at the time in biomedical sales, and also working at a hospital helping monitor biomedical equipment. And I started talking to all kinds of different, people who are working at the hospital and in the organization about what some of my other alternatives were, given some of the strengths that I thought I had and what they had seen in me. And everybody said, "Oh, you should go work with people. It seems like something that would be good for you," which was really broad. But I decided to take that very seriously. I did a short little internship in human resources, and then decided, okay, maybe human resources is really the path that I wanted should follow. So since I didn't know anything about it, I decided to get a degree, and that's what I got my master's in. I got my master's in industrial relations, and when I came to the U.S. for the first time to do that, I got my degree at Cornell, and I arrived in upstate New York, and somewhere about halfway through my time there, surprisingly and amazingly, I was given a teaching assistantship. And the first day that I walked into class and taught the class, I was like, "Oh, I finally figured that this is the happiest I've ever been working. Like, I'm doing something here that seems right, and I should find a way to keep doing this." And so that was really, in some ways, the path. I found a couple of mentors at the school who were very encouraging, who helped me figure out what I needed to do, how to sort of figure out whether, beyond the teaching, whether research was also right for me. And I spent some time doing that, and then grad school came relatively soon after.
Right. And so what was it like whenever you arrived to the United States for the first time in Ithaca, New York?
So, I guess anyone who knows me knows I'm like, I really like new opportunities and new things. And so I was really excited. I also just really am interested in people, which is why I probably study organizational behavior. So that was the other aspect, is I'm just genuinely interested in getting to know different and new people. But I think for me, one of the big things that's very different is I was very introverted and very shy and very nervous. And I had never done things like spoken up in a college classroom, which is amazing now because I give, like, most of my students are expected to do that a lot. And I spend my life talking to people I don't know in front of large classrooms. But I remember going to my first class at 8 a.m. class in human resources and feeling like I had so much to say, but being so nervous to speak up, both because I felt so different, because I felt that, I didn't know whether I was saying the right thing, that literally shaking, like every time I wanted to say something, I would write down exactly what I wanted. And then when I raised my hand, my body would really be shaking. But for me, it was really a transformative experience. It pushed me out of my comfort zone, and it really showed me things that were different. It exposed me to a different way of thinking, a different form of classroom. So in general, I would say more generative than anything else. Though the snow was too intense for me.
Yeah, and you're still getting that now in
Yes.
in Chapel Hill.
In Chapel Hill, unfortunately, yes. I loved it for the first 2 weeks, and then by May, I was like crying, like, when's this gonna end? So
Yeah.
that was probably the hardest. The weather was probably the most challenging thing to figure out.
Yeah, so before we move into the next question, I would want to give a little context to our viewers about how we put together this list. So this year we received about 400, almost 400 nominations from faculty, deans, and students. And so then we whittled that down into the 50 top professors that we publish on the list. So it's already a lot of people that we consider, and then we put it there. And so I go through and I edit all of these, and so I read about what you all are doing. And one of the reasons why I wanted to ask you to hop on a video interview with us is because your research is one of the more fascinating areas that I saw while going through and editing. So it's about gossip, correct? And gossip in the workplace?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So that's part of it. So why don't we start there, and then tell me about what you're doing in that area, and then what you're doing outside of that area as well.
Sure. Yeah, so, it's so much of my sort of research comes from both my experiences when I was actually working. I worked a little bit in consulting, and I worked in, as I mentioned, human resources. And one of the things I sort of noticed across the board in every organization, in every country, I also come from a very big family where really, all people do is gossip about each other. And so I was just genuinely interested in trying to understand sort of the functions displayed, because of the fact that we're also told from the time we're really little that gossiping is something we shouldn't engage in and something we should stay far from. And it's almost sinful to be engaging in it, depending on the religion you're in. And so, but I'm like, but at the same time, this is something that we seem to be doing all the time. And so I became really fascinated in trying to sort of understand the benefits also, but maybe also the costs that it had. And so still working on getting this stuff published. But in a nutshell, I've done studies on gossip with pairs, so people engaging in gossip with each other and what happens. And to do that, I brought friends into a lab, and I had them talk to each other. And all I told them to do was talk about other people. I didn't tell them what to say or anything. I went back and coded those conversations for how much of it was actually evaluated, which is in some ways the component of gossip that's important. And I really found that what it did was, while people did tend to get pretty negative in the things they said about each other, which is a whole other topic, for the individuals that were engaging, they actually landed up feeling much closer together, closer to each other. They also were much more likely to do things like lean into each other. They were more likely to agree and like nod, when each other was talking. They even did things like move their chairs closer together. I had a little marking on the ground that I would sort of look at to see whether that was that worked in the same way. And so there were these sort of general like dyadic rapport type outcomes. But then the really fascinating thing was that the pairs that engaged in gossip, when they then negotiated with each other after, were more likely to cooperate even. We're more likely to find these sort of benefits in terms of work-related outcomes. So, all really good things that were somewhat surprising to me, actually. Like the extent to which they were so positive was really surprising. But then beyond that, I started thinking a little bit about, well, what happens if you extend it out? It's not just the pair, but it's the team. And so I then did a study with student teams. And in that study, I found slightly different effects where I found that teams that actually engage in a lot of gossip about individuals outside of the team experience the same cooperative type of outcomes. But in the teams that talked a lot about people within the team actually had the opposite. So that those teams were just sort of seen as more political, there were more negative emotions, because I think people sensed that there was a lot of conversation about each other. They felt monitored a lot. And so those teams actually had sort of worse performance, worse cooperation, and so on. And, continue to sort of do this. A graduate student and I are starting to do a little bit of research on gossip networks in a bigger organization, but it's slow and steady. It's like one of those things that's hard to study because nobody wants to say they do it.
Yeah. And I wonder how much time is lost in an organization from gossiping on like a weekly basis, how much productivity is lost.
And I would argue that while there's like certain degrees of productivity that are lost, there's also other benefits that are gained. So like now you and I are talking about something, suddenly now we have a sense of like what's appropriate and what's not, what's valued and what's not because of a story you told me about somebody, or now you and I are feeling closer together. So we're just going to be happier to hang out the next time and work together instead of complaining about staying late on Friday night because we developed this sort of, so there are these, I think this is what's so interesting. It's this, in some ways, like it's a really dark behavior, but it has these sort of glimmers of light kind of associated.
Yeah, and bonding, which makes sense, and that's something that you don't think of very much whenever you think about, gossip. That's fascinating.
But the amount of time we spend at work now, it's like so important to really kind of get to know the people we work with. So.
Right. Yeah, totally. So now I'm going to switch over. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that I think you asked me a little bit about what I was doing next, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know if we have time for that, but I can talk about it.
Briefly, yeah.
Okay. I'd say my most recent stuff is I've become really interested in sort of what's happening sort of in the world. We're constantly reading the news and how the news is starting to affect the way we communicate with people at work. So I've started doing some work with some of my graduate students on how individuals choose to engage in challenging conversations about some of these more challenging issues that are really important related to diversity and inclusion, but then also how people whose sort of certain identities are affected by these news items they read. So if I'm an immigrant and I'm reading about what's happening to sort of immigrant children, am I talking about that at work? And if I do, how am I talking about it and how am I bringing it into work? So sort of an extension of gossip, but really sort of when you think about gossip from a much broader context in some ways. So.
Yeah, if you all need a small company to examine for your research, Poets and Quants would love to have you.
You should be a little afraid you said that to me.
We'll move on from there then. So some fun questions then to close us out.
Okay.
If you could be any cereal in the world, what breakfast cereal would you be and why?
I think that is a real fun question. Let's see. I guess I would say Raisin Bran.
Okay.
Why would I say Raisin Bran? Because I guess I'm sort of in my own personality and the way I am with people, I'm sort of sweet and nice. This is how people tend to sort of think about me, but then I'm also sort of really crunchy. So,
Okay.
and can be not as kind and sweet, and that's always surprising to people.
Okay.
Maybe I shouldn't be quoted on that, actually.
It's too late now. Okay, next question. Do you have a spirit animal? And if so, what is your spirit animal and why?
Yes, my spirit animal is a chipmunk.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. It's small. I'm pretty small. It's full of energy. I'm really high energy. It seems like it's always looking around and smart. So that's that, like sort of keeping an eye on what's happening around it. And then last, I would say it blends in to sort of the surroundings, but then when it actually pops out, you really notice it. So that's
all good points about a chipmunk. Are the Tar Heels going to make it to the Final Four this year in men's basketball?
Oh, I want to say yes so badly. If anyone knows anything about me, is I'm just I'm an ultimate Tar Heel fan. And I would say outside of basketball, I go watch almost all the other sports too. I'm just like I hold my Tar Heel identity really, really close. So I'm just going to be optimistic and I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I don't want to jinx it by saying no.
Yeah, well, they certainly have a chance, it seems like, every year.
It seems like, right.
Who's your favorite Tar Heels basketball player in the history of Tar Heels basketball? I know I have mine, so I just want to see.
Oh, no. So I pick a really recent one since I'm a pretty recent transplant, and I'll pick two for two different reasons.
Okay.
The first one I'll pick is Luke May, and that's because I actually taught him last year, and he really embodied to me sort of an amazing, sort of the Tar Heel spirit and determination and humility and all the things that we value here really deeply. And then sort of from a personal, just from watching him play, I probably would pick Justin Jackson. That was my most recent. Watching them win was really special.
Okay. So my favorite, I'm going to go back in history a little bit. Michael Jordan has to be my favorite Tar Heels. Obviously.
My brother would agree. My brother was excited when I came here just literally for that.
Yeah. Okay, and then our final question for you, we'll bring it back a little bit more serious now. What are you grateful for?
So I have a lot, I'd say. I think I'm going to sort of go with, various streams. I'd say from a purely professional sort of perspective, I'd say this has been a pretty good run for me so far. I just found out a couple months ago that I got tenure, so I'm staying in Kenan-Flagler for the long haul. So I'd say if there's something I'm extremely grateful for at this point, that would be it. Sort of all the hard work culminating in that. And I think that relates to a couple other things. I'm really grateful for the sort of amazing environment that I have here. So really fantastic and humble and kind and brilliant students that I get to work with, both at a graduate and undergraduate level, and really fantastic colleagues as well, who are very supportive and engaging and sort of keep me motivated every day. I'm very grateful to have been recognized by you guys. This has been really a special time for me to be recognized by Poets and Quants. And then from a personal perspective, I have two little boys, and they sort of both manage to keep me frustrated and grateful every day.
Yeah, I have a brother, and so I know how that goes with two young. Okay, well, so we've come to the end of our time. Shimul, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us and go on video with us.
I'm happy to do that. Thank you so much. Really honored again to be invited to do this, and honored to be on your top 50 for 2018. It's very special. Yes.
And for the viewers, so you can see this article and Professor Melwani's full profile on poetsandquantsforundergrads.com, and be sure to subscribe to the Poets and Quants YouTube channel and the Poets and Quants for Undergrads YouTube channel to see this video and more videos as they keep coming out. We'll be doing the series for the next month or so with a few new professors. So thanks, and thanks for watching.